Welcome, everyone. We're waiting for Nadir to join us. Hopefully, he'll be with us soon. Oh, looks like he's joining us now. Okay. Welcome, everybody. This is oh, wait a minute. Let me make sure closed captioning is turned on. Okay. So this is a meeting of the, oops, I think we have a problem. Mike, Donovan, you still got an
Hello?
echo problem. Mike,
Yes.
we're still
What kind
getting
of problem?
we're still getting an echo problem, which I think is probably from you again.
Oh, bummer. I just rebooted everything, so I'm not quite sure what the problem is.
Okay, well, you need to mute when you're not talking.
Okay.
And if that gets rid of it, which it seems to, then we're good. Okay, this is a meeting of the Zoning Board of Appeals. We are resuming the hearing on an application by Robert Recchia for the issuance of a comprehensive permit under General Laws, Chapter 40B, Sections 20 through 23, for parcels on Troutbrook Road, Chickering Drive, and Edgewater Drive in Dover. First thing I wanted to discuss was that we've received a number of submissions in the last day or so, several emails from residents in the neighborhood, a response to that from the applicant's counsel, Jonathan Silverstein, and we'll deal with those in a moment, but it is helpful to get submissions like that sooner rather than later. I understand that people have their reasons, but it's hard for us to consider them fully if they don't get submitted sooner. And Jonathan, I'm not criticizing you because obviously you're responding to the stuff that just came in, which we appreciate. So what I'd like to do is to go through the issues that Sean Reardon of Tetra Tech, our peer review consultant for environmental issues, has been dealing with, and then address the issues that Cliff Bomer of Davis Square Associates, our peer review architectural consultant, has been dealing with, both their issues, their comments, and responses from the applicant. And then we'll go from there. So Sean, initially, do you want to say anything more about your analysis of the materials, the application materials submitted by the applicant?
Sure, maybe something just real brief, but just in the way of sort of a reminder. Back in November, we issued a comment letter with just over 40 comments. A lot of them were comments held in common between the four different sites. Basically, because we have four different sites, we issued a series of comments for each site. Some of those were redundant, so I'd say in total there was probably about 18 total comments. The more critical ones were at the time, because there's so much fill at the lot, there were basically the sites were actually creating sort of a dam at conditions at the interface between the property and the street line. So what we asked was for more detail on the grading plan to make sure that that water that was wanting to get off the edge of the road could still do so. That was addressed in the most recent submissions. One of the bigger concerns we had was the limit of work shown on the plans. We didn't feel accurately reflected the true limit of work because of the mitigation that would be required to offset for the fill being proposed within the floodplain. that has been revised. So you'll see on the revised plans, the limit of work is quite a bit larger than it was originally indicated. And in some cases, the site's got a little bit more compact to reduce the amount of fill being installed in the floodplain. One of the other things we asked for was a summary of the cuts and fills for each site, because obviously, the site's going to have a lot of fill and in some places a lot of cut as well. So we wanted to have something on the plan that gave the board a little bit of an indication as to how much net material is going to have to come and go from the site. So you'll see that on the plan as well. Then there was one thing that was pretty important to us as well, was that some of the proposed grading on one of the lots was directing runoff to the property boundary. So basically creating a flow pattern that wasn't there that would go onto the abutter's property. That was addressed. And then basically they hit on all the other technical comments we've had. So in summary, there's been quite a few changes to the plans. All of them are positive, and in my opinion, they've addressed all the technical concerns we have. At this point, I just want to remind folks that these are preliminary plans. They still have to go through detailed review with the Board of Health and detailed review with the Conservation Commission. And those reviews are of final construction plans. So, the standard for the level of detail is even higher on that. But both those processes are, still remain in place, even though there's a comprehensive permit on the project.
Okay, thank you, Sean. Lynn, does anybody on your side want to address any of what Sean just discussed?
Well, I just want to thank Sean for all of his Lynn Sweet LDS Consulting Group, Wellesley, Mass, for the record. I want to thank Sean for all of the time and effort that he put in with working with Dan to address his comments and concerns. I do want to just point out two things, and then I'm going to turn it over to Dan. I mean, one is that, and I think we've mentioned this before, that for single family homes, there are no, they are not required to comply with the state stormwater management principles, which we again voluntarily chose to address, given that we think it has made the plans better. We think it's important not only for the people that are going to be purchasing the units, but as well as the neighbors. The other thing that I want to say is I know that there have been a lot of comments from the neighbors about the fact that they may have flood issues on their property. And I think Dan can speak to that a little bit, but we can only address the issues that are on our sites. We have actually put in stormwater management plans to manage the water that are on our sites. Most homeowners don't do that when they build projects. So I'm just going to see if Dan wants to add anything in at this point in time. Thank you.
Dan?
Mr. Chairman, Dan Merrickin with Legacy Engineering. Would you like me to go through the plans at this point?
Whatever you want to do. Floor
Okay.
is yours.
I will do that then. Okay, this is the updated site plan. And as Sean mentioned, we made a number of changes addressing their comments. This is lot 1. Not a lot of change in the overall concept. Basically what we did is I'm actually going to show you an overview of lots 1 and 2 together. So the question about how runoff comes off of Trout Brook Road, the shoulder in this area here in front of lot 2 is elevated above the road slightly. So what happens is the runoff runs down along the edge of the pavement here. And then when you get around here, it comes off the pavement and runs basically right along kind of the lot line between the street and lot 1. So we added grading detail that basically ensured that we would maintain that flow pattern, and that any water that's coming off the road here would come down right along the edge just inside the lot, and then it would flow along the edge of the road down into the wetland area like it does today, exactly like it does today. We added some more detail on the compensatory flood storage area right here, because about half of the septic system is in a very shallow floodplain area. And on lot 2, there weren't a lot of changes. Basically, the drainage change that we made based on the comments we received was to basically focus on the roof runoff for infiltration. So the drainage systems that you see in these plans are the same as they were previously. They were raised in some cases as much as we could, but we're basically just directing all of our roof runoff into these infiltration systems so that they could be recharged to the groundwater table. That's 1 and 2. Lot 4 here, the major change here was that 2 things. Number 1, we demonstrate with grading how the street runoff that comes off of Chickering and Trout Brook around this corner here will flow through a shallow swale around the proposed yard into the floodplain area, just like it does today. And then on the left side here, basically this is where we focused our compensatory flood storage area. We originally thought we might need an area on the right side of the plan, but we decided that we didn't need that. So what we're proposing to do is along the left side is to build a shallow swale that would basically take the runoff from our site and also from the neighboring property and divert it back towards the floodplain and towards the wetland area. So I know
Dan,
that there's...
can you just explain what a compensatory flood storage area is?
Sure. When you propose to do fill in a floodplain, you have to replicate the volume that you're filling the same amount or more. So in this case, on lot 4, this little area right here, I'm outlining, is in the floodplain. So we're proposing to fill there. The fill volume on this particular lot is quite small. It's only 400 cubic feet, which may sound like a lot, but it's not. So what we do is we provided this table up here, basically. So we're gonna take an area here on the left side of the lot that is not currently in the floodplain, and we're gonna lower the elevation of that. And that creates the offset, so that's called compensatory flood storage. So if you were filling in 100 cubic feet of floodplain, you need to provide an excavation somewhere that's connected to the floodplain that's at least 100 cubic feet or more. So that's what we did here. And so that's this hatched area here on the left. And this will improve, this whole area is pretty flat, so this will improve drainage essentially in this area during anything but the most severe flood event. This will provide an avenue for some of the water that normally I think sits on the neighbor's land here to work into our little swale and flow back and away from their yard and their driveway. On lot 45, this is really where the most significant grading changes were made, and it all related to the compensatory flood storage. So originally we had an area in the back here as compensatory flood storage, and then an area tagged on this side. When we got down and into the nitty-gritty calculations of providing that compensatory flood storage volume at different elevation intervals, the configuration of the compensatory flood storage area changed a little bit. In the net on this lot, we're actually increasing the total flood storage by almost 3,000 cubic feet. So when basically we're going to lower this hatched area here, and we're going to lower this hatched area here. And when we do that, in the end, we will have more flood storage capacity on this lot than exists presently at and below the 100-year flooded stage. So those were the main changes. Happy to answer any questions anybody has about any of the site plans or any of the design information that we provided.
Dan, on that lot 45, in order to create the compensatory storage, could you explain what you've done in the way of walls that are created in order to make that possible?
Sure. In this area, we already had a wall around the septic system, so there's still a wall there. We already had a wall in the backyard here, so that's not very different. What we did do is we added a short retaining wall, 2 feet and change, that would run along the side of the driveway, around the drainage system, and along the edge of the street. And that allows us to take this area. This is the floodplain line as it exists today. So that allows us to take this area in the front here and lower it and make it floodplain when it is not currently floodplain. So we're gonna expand the linear footprint of the floodplain on this side of the lot to offset the fact that some of the housework here occurs within the floodplain. So it's that kind of offset. So there'll be a short retaining wall here along the front and around the side of the driveway.
What's the height of the retaining wall in each of those areas?
At this point here, it's 2.4 feet.
Where is that?
That's
Oh,
right,
on the street.
right. Yep, right there.
So in other words, there'll be a drop down from the street of 2.4. Is that 2.2 feet 4 inches or 2 and
It's
4 tenths?
2.4 feet, so it's 2 feet 5 inches. And that's behind the layout of the street, right? So you have the paved width of the road, then you have a roughly 10-foot shoulder. And then there would be the wall on the lot.
Okay. And what's the height of the retaining wall in the other areas? Around the septic and in the back?
Around the septic, it's about 3 to 4 feet. And in the back, it varies. 105, that's right there, it's 3 feet, 3 feet. So 3 to 4 feet, 2 to 4 feet, basically. All the walls are 2 to 4 feet high.
Okay. Board members, any other questions about any of this?
Well, that land that's behind the wall with the 2-foot wall that goes around the corner, is that woods or is that lawn? What is that land going to be?
That
In
was
the area zone.
that will be planted, not as lawn. That's
Not
something that we would work out with the Conservation Commission, but that is an area that we would lower the grade, reloam it, replant it with some trees and shrubs.
So if this gentleman that bought this house wanted to put a pool in, forget it. Or a shed that might go on that land.
Yeah, no, that's
There's no place for
compensatory
any of that.
flood storage area. That's not part of the developed footprint.
Okay, well, you don't know what's gonna happen like 12 years from now, unfortunately. Okay, thank you.
So Dan, you're saying the owner can't put any kind of structures on that area?
No, it's a resource area, right? So as part of this effort under the Wetlands Protection Act, the applicant will have to go to the Conservation Commission for a permit to work in the floodplain. And at any point in the future, if anybody wanted to do any work in the floodplain, they would have to do the same thing. So this whole area that's hatched off to the right here, this area behind the wall here and this area here will all be floodplain area. So someone would need a permit down the road to do any kind of work in that area.
Don, do you have any comments on what Dan has said?
Yeah, he pretty much hit all the high points. One thing I would say to sort of Laverne is, Laverne, the entire site is in jurisdiction of the Concom. So literally any work that takes place on the site would have to get a permit, whether it was in the compensatory storage area or not. So you can rest assured that any activity on the site would have to go through their review.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else on the board have any questions of Dan? Hearing none. Thank you, Dan. Let's turn to Cliff Bomer. Cliff, you've submitted your final review. Do you have any comments you want to make in connection with that?
I do. Maybe there's context, but also maybe while we've got Sean and Dan on board and reacting to Laverne's comments or questions. The reason in my letter that I've been pushing a lot. I mean, the first draft, I was asking a lot about really defining the limits of work. And this is exactly the reason why I think for neighbors who are expecting a modest sized home and a driveway, and kind of visualizing what kind of impact that may have, is much smaller than what actually has to happen, between building up areas for the stormwater management and the compensatory storage areas. I appreciate that the applicant really has provided us with that information that allows us to really think about and anticipate what would happen if these buildings are built. So I think Dan's comments are maybe a good segue or picking up a little bit, because one question I had in my report, or it may have actually been implicit, but at least, I don't know, 4 times in the report, I was really urging the applicant to submit landscape plans, and they did commit to doing that prior to issuance of the building permit. But I am curious about what are the limits of what can be planted in those compensatory areas, as well as a swale, for example. I forget which address it was, but you showed a swale that's going to pick up water from the neighbor and from the new building. So I'm just putting that out there as a question. Dan mentioned you could plant trees and shrubs, but in your opinion, in the compensatory storage areas, can the scale of native growth that's happening in there now, can you plant significant trees and materials that could effectively provide screening?
So let me just go through each of the floods compensatory storage areas.
Great. Thank you.
So this is the one on lot 1. This is a small area. Everything outside the wetland line is currently wooded. So this area will just be regraded, loamed, planted, and left to revegetate naturally. So any kinds of trees and shrubs that normally grow in upland areas will be able to grow in these areas. You have to realize that on this lot and also on lot 4, the amount of flooding in a 100-year flood event is inches, right? We are at the very, very edge of the floodplain. So these are areas that see, a sustained flooding event pretty rarely. Now, obviously, when it rains, they see puddling and things like that, but like an actual 100-year flood is not something that's going to happen a lot. So any kind of upland, native upland vegetation can grow in this area, and also on lot 4 in this area here. Now, we would not plant any trees in the swale, obviously, but all of this area back here around the edges, we certainly can do that, trees and shrubs. For lot 45, it's the same kind of thing. If you go out there today, basically the upland areas of the site, which includes the floodplain, right? The floodplain occurs in a lot of the upland areas of the site, are wooded. And that's because they're not inundated very frequently, because again, they're in the upper edges of the floodplain. So in this area down here, we probably would plant wetland type of shrub species, shrubs that can tolerate some periodic saturation. But in these 2 areas here and here, any type of native upland, woodland plant varieties would be fine. Trees, shrubs. So that's what we would focus on in those areas.
What do you think? I don't mean to interrupt. I appreciate this information on the plan west boundary between the mounded up area and the neighbor. What's possible in that little area, that strip?
Anything really. We could plant trees. We could plant screening trees, evergreens. We could plant shrubs. I would envision that across the front, certainly we would plant a low shrub wall there, just so basically to obscure the retaining wall. But on the left side, we certainly could plant more substantial screening trees, evergreen trees in that location. And that would be fine if that's something that the board wanted to condition.
Keep going. This is really helpful.
Well, and then this
If I
whole
could just
area is
add,
gonna get revegetated. This whole area is gonna get replanted with trees and shrubs. And it's just gonna be left alone to naturally revegetate. And this is a pretty wide area. There's a pretty good separation between a house here and the adjoining home. There's actually a strip of land in between our site and the adjoining home.
and just if I could add real quickly, I don't see any reason that we would have to prohibit planting from that swale either, Dan. I mean, yeah, the swale's probably not going to see a whole heck of a lot of water, and it's only going to see it periodically. So I don't think necessarily we have to avoid planting trees in that swale.
Yep, okay.
It's not really a rain garden or something that needs, okay.
No, and these are all upland areas. They're non-wetland areas. So, you know, any kind of upland plant or tree is gonna do fine in any of these areas.
What is the swale area that Sean is referring to?
I would be on lot
It's on
5. I mean, on lot 4. Hang on a second.
between the driveway and, you know,
That's this area here on the left. This is a very shallow
Okay.
swale, you know, it's 6 inches deep. It's just, its purpose is just to collect water and route it back here. But you certainly, there's room here along the side to plant trees and shrubs.
Dan, can you go back to?
It's more of a conscientious shaping of the surface that directs flow back to where it wants to go.
Right.
mm,
So Chairman, you wanted me to go back?
To lot 45.
Okay.
So basically the back half of that lot, which is at the top, won't be touched.
No, this is wetland. So the limit of work is this line right here. This little line. This is compensatory flood storage, so this will just be disturbed for the purpose of regrading and then replanted and left alone. And then the limit of the developed area is basically this wall. And then this whole area is just to be regraded, replanted, and left alone.
So the front half there of the limit of work and that compensatory area, is that all going to be totally cleared initially?
It will have to be cleared to be lowered, yes. As we get towards the back edges, the clearing would be selective. But when you get into these locations where we're reducing the grade by 2.5 feet or so, you're not gonna be able to retain any existing trees of substance. So we would plant new trees in those areas and then just leave it alone and let it revegetate.
So there'd be landscaping in the compensatory area.
Yes.
And then what, if any, landscaping would you do in the rest of the area where there is construction?
Well, there'll obviously be typical foundation landscaping around each home. And then I think it's a good idea across each of for lots 1 and 2 and 45 to put a row of shrubs across the front of the elevated septic system. That'll basically make that little 3-4 foot wall just kind of disappear.
Okay. Cliff, anything else?
well, I just wanted to clarify why I kind of butted in on this bridging between the landscaping and the architecture. I think the latest letter that I issued acknowledges that there's been progress made, a lot of progress picking up things that weren't quite right in the architectural drawings, clarifying intention really more than anything else. And I think they really reached a satisfactory level. I think in my view, it's, as I said at the very end of my letter, it's 4 homes. You know, this is not a 45 unit development. It's 4 homes with a lot of separation between them. From an impact kind of bigger scale, it's modest. But given some of the things we've been talking about tonight, these homes will not be developed the way that most homes have been developed, with the kind of space and slack space and landscaping, which is why I've been pushing on the landscaping, because I think the key is that building designs are, I think, are fine. I think they're going to fit in fine. The scale is nothing extraordinary. It's really, I think, the key to the degree that these homes will feel kind of like organically integrated into the community will be through the landscaping. And I think my advice to the board is would be consider a condition that really does require the applicant has already agreed to submitting pre-construction or pre-permitting, which would kind of be normal anyway, that you would include that in a permit set. But I hope the board will be in a position to retain a qualified reviewer of the plans, largely to really confirm the sustainability of the plans that are being proposed and the appropriateness of the plans. So I think that's where I'm at. These will be noticed. There's no, I think the limits of work have really made that very clear. And that's kind of been my goal, is to make sure people understand what's coming if this project is approved.
Lynn, would the applicant be receptive to some kind of review of the landscaping as a condition of the special permit?
And can I wait to respond to that until after Sean has spoken, please?
Oh, sure. John, you want to say something?
Yeah, I was just hoping that perhaps if there were any sort of specimen or really special trees in these areas of clearing, that just the applicant consider sort of creative measures to save them, because you could probably mound up the soil around them to maintain them without losing a lot of the storage volume that you'd otherwise get. So if there could just be one little extra look at, if there's a 20-inch beech or a 24-inch beech tree out there, gosh, it would be a crime to get rid of it. So just if you could just look to see if there's anything more saving, and perhaps, explore creative ways of doing so.
Yeah, and I think that can be part of, we already discussed the condition of flagging trees to be removed, and that can be something that, at the time of construction can be investigated to confirm whether there is one or two trees that we should save. And like you say, we can, dig a little deeper in some other areas to save a special tree.
So all of this, I appreciate what Cliff is trying to say. My concern about the questions about these conditions is that much of this is in the jurisdiction of the Conservation Commission. That is the entity that is going to be prescribing what can and can't go into these areas. And that and so I'm concerned a little bit about duplication of efforts. We have said that we will produce a landscape plan for the board to review. We have said that we will flag trees. It's been, again, my experience that it's the Conservation Commission that tells you which trees need to come and, which trees need to go and stay. So I'm a little bit concerned about the scope creep here. I'm also concerned about the statement by Cliff that this is going to be different than the other projects that go up in the community. Every single neighbor to these sites has a house and a septic system that is built up, and nobody looks at those plans. And you can see them. There's no shrubs. There's just an open lawn. So we want to be cooperative, and we've said we will be cooperative. But as far as further reviews go, again, I think that those reviews are going to happen at the Conservation Commission, because they are really going to be in charge of these sites being developed and to ensure that everything follows their order of conditions in order to get a certificate of compliance to actually get a building permit on these sites. So I want to be able to try and strike a balance of, you know, recognizing, you know, that we know we need to put up landscaping, we know we need to put up shrubs, but I'm concerned about another round of peer reviews. And I actually wanted to ask either Dan or Sean, you know, when you get to the Conservation Commission and you get your order of conditions, how, you know, I believe they have a conservation agent that comes out to the site and is, you know, and reviews to make sure that everything is in compliance. So I just want to let my expert talk a little bit more about this.
Yeah, Lynn is right that when we go to the Conservation Commission under the Wetlands Protection Act, these, particularly the compensatory flood storage areas, what we're going to propose to plant will have to be specified for the Conservation Commission, and they will. So we don't want to be in a situation where, you know, we provide something that the Conservation Commission has asked for, and all of a sudden someone else is reviewing it and wants something changed. You know, I mean, I think the Conservation Commission is really the right entity to decide, and particularly in these compensatory flood storage areas, what the plantings should look like. As far as the, you know, the aesthetic landscape plantings, I mean, there's not a lot to that. But you know, kind of the key planting areas are going to be things that the Conservation Commission are going to really make the decisions on.
So would the applicant be receptive to a condition from the Board of Appeals that says that landscaping is to be subject to review by a representative of the Concom to their satisfaction?
Absolutely, no problem with that.
John, did you want to say something?
Yeah, the only thing I would say is in the scope of review of the Concom, they're not necessarily going to consider screening for the abutters as part of their purview under the Wetlands Protection Act. So what I would say is there's a little, I agree with Lynn that I don't think there's a whole lot of review that's going to be necessary following the Concom's review, but I would hope that as part of their Concom submittal, they'd include the proposed mitigation planting for the neighbors so that when that plan exits the Concom's jurisdiction, those plantings are on there and have been approved by the commission. I do think it's prudent.
Not an issue.
Yeah.
I think that's the right time.
Yeah, include a requirement that, you know, the board just needs to take a look at that to make sure that that screening planting has been added as been represented here. And if it's there and it's approved by the commission, I think it should be more than fine.
I'm sorry, Lynn, what were you saying? I didn't quite catch it.
I think that is the appropriate time. I 100% agree with Sean's recommendation for a condition that the screening plan be submitted to the Concom, the screening for the neighbors.
So Sean, you're saying have the Concom address the issue of screening for the neighbors, even though that's not 100% what they would normally review?
Well, here's what is the Concom isn't in a position to require screening for the neighbors as part of issuing their permit. But if screening is proposed, the installation of that planting is within their purview. So as long as the applicant, when they submit to the Concom, includes planting for screening, it'll get the requisite level review. My only concern is if there's no opportunity for the ZBA to confirm that screening planting was put in, the project could conceivably submit a plan to the Concom that doesn't have any screening and it still be approved. So my only concern is that the screening gets in, as long as it's reviewed by Concom. I don't think there's any additional detailed review that needs to happen other than sort of the administrative check that the screening plantings are there.
So if the Board of Appeals imposes as a condition of a special permit that any submission to the Concom includes screening for the neighbors, that would solve the problem?
Yep. I would say appropriate and adequate screening for the neighbors.
Okay.
And Mr. Chairman, there's really only a couple of locations where I think that's what we're focused on. Lots 1 and 2 are gonna have a lot of wooded areas around the whole developed area, so I don't think screening there is necessary. There's gonna be lots of woods around those 2 houses. So I think we're talking about the north side of lot 4, which is that area with the swale, and I can put that up here. And I'll just show you what I'm talking about with lots 1 and 2. So with lots 1 and 2, you can see this is our neighbor to the west. Our neighbor's house to the south is off the sheet. So all of this area is going to be wooded. So there's lots of screening there around the houses on lots 1 and 2. For lot 4, again, back here is all wooded. There's no homes on this side. So it's really just the north sideline of lot 4 is an area where screening could be provided. And then on lot 45, it would be the northerly and southerly sidelines of the disturbed areas.
Okay.
That makes sense.
Board members, any questions or comments on any of the landscaping issues?
I have a question on Cliff Bomer's letter from December 18th. You have to read these things 25 times before you understand it. But what does it mean when it says most single families in this area are further set back from the street? Then it says the front setbacks of the buildings on all 4 sites is much less than typical. How far is the front setback on these 4 houses? It doesn't give you any numbers. It just says it's not as much as typical. Anybody have an answer for that?
It varies from lot 45 is the closest. The garage is 22 feet from the layout line. That's not the pavement line, that's from the layout line. The other houses are all about 30 feet, 32 feet to the layout line. And then there's an additional 9 or 10 feet of grass strip before you see pavement.
So you're looking for a variance for that also, for the setbacks being too close to the street? I don't see that listed here anyplace.
Not a variance, it's a waiver.
It's a waiver.
Waiver, sorry, it's waivers, all right. And on that Edgewater Drive, it says, the site needs to be cleared to the lot line and a retaining wall ranging from heights of 4 to 6 feet must be built to contain the leaching field for the new home. And that's also the lot where you have the 2.5 foot retaining wall going all around the edge.
That is the lot, yes.
Yeah.
That's not
A
a
lot of
wall.
wall.
That's
It's
a
a lot.
wall below grade. So the one along the street for the compensatory flood storage is below the grade of the street. You're not going to see it. No one would ever see it.
This is more like a foundation wall.
Kind of. It's basically, we're
Cement-
lowering the grade
wall?
behind the street, so we need a wall at the edge of the street to basically make that grade transition. So that wall along the compensatory flood storage on lot 45 on the right side, no one's ever going to see that except the people who live in that lot.
Does that create any kind of potential hazard that would require some kind of protective fencing or something along those lines?
I don't think so. I don't have any objection if the board conditioned that a fence be installed on top of that wall.
Is there any requirement for that sort of protective measure?
No,
So
'cause there's no sidewalk there. If there were a sidewalk in proximity to it, there may be, but again, putting a short fence across the top of that section of lot 45, and I could put that up for you.
And while Dan's doing that, there's also an analysis called the clear zone analysis. So when there's a certain distance away from the road, an obstruction needs to be before it needs protection. And in this case, the wall is far enough away from the road, and the speed on the road is small enough that it doesn't require like a guardrail or anything like that.
But if the board wanted a condition that a fence be installed along here, that's fine. It could be something as simple as a post and rail fence or a 4-foot chain link fence, anything like that.
I guess, I mean, I know, that Dan, that you're offering that up. I just think that that is an area that people aren't or should not be walking on. Right? It's gonna go back to its natural state, isn't it?
The area in the compensatory flood storage will be left to naturally revegetate, correct?
Right, so that's not gonna be anywhere that somebody should be trespassing, is it?
No, people shouldn't be trespassing on other people's property.
Yeah, and I guess in some of it, sometimes people like fences and sometimes people don't like fences. So I'm concerned about creating something in an area that's gonna have to be maintained over time. If there isn't a regulation that's requiring it.
And I'd add to that too, that the grade changes barely over 18 inches, which is the height required for fall protection on like a ramp or a staircase. So, I don't think there's any sort of compelling need to do anything to sort of protect that edge.
I'm just asking questions. Okay,
Mr. Chair, could I jump in just real quick for a moment?
of course, Jonathan, sure.
Thanks. And if it's all right with you, I just want to share my screen for 1 second to point something out for the board. Just to Cliff's point about what's typical in the area and the extent of clearing and whatnot. Can everyone see this?
Not yet.
Hasn't come up yet, Sean.
Just seeing black screen right now.
It's loading, it says. There we go.
Yep.
Can you see that?
Yes.
So we're on Claybrook Road. This is Trout Brook. So we're right around the corner from the site. I just want to point out, in terms of lots being cleared and retaining walls and imposing views in the neighborhood, I don't know, Dan, I'm assuming this is a septic system here, a mounted one.
Yes, that's a mounted septic system.
Nice big retaining wall, not screened with anything, entire lot's been cleared, no screening. We're agreeing to do screening that no other single family home would have to do, simply because we're at a 40B. Similarly, nice big retaining wall here. I'm assuming there's another septic system built up, and a lot of clearing there. Much larger homes. Just want to point out that we are offering to do screening, and we're not backing off of that. And at the same time, I think that it's important to note that every home is going to be different in a neighborhood. Some are going to be bigger, some are going to be smaller, some are going to be closer to the street, some are going to be further away. 20 feet from the street is not, some crazy urban, monstrosity. They're still set back from the street. They're going to be nicely landscaped. We're agreeing to have that reviewed as part of the Conservation Commission review. So just ask that the board keep that in mind.
Okay.
Thank you.
Do you want Erin to run through the changes that she made to the plans at Cliff's request? I know that I think we went through some of them at the last hearing, but since everyone's here, I just wanted to offer that up if you felt it would be helpful. I think she did also add try and add what a view from the street might look like, to show what a retaining wall might look like.
Sure, can't hurt. Go ahead. Darren?
Hi, I'm Erin from CME Architects. I'm gonna share my screen. I have the renderings and the plans up on here. All right, everybody's able to see?
Yep.
So we have updated the renderings. We've pushed them back to set you at the street where you're looking at about 5'8" viewpoint height. So these are a little bit more accurate. We weren't able to go in since our last meeting to every lot, but we did take a couple of the lots to show where some of the septics would be and to show how we would propose some shrubbery around those lots. I can skim through to the other ones just so you can kind of get a view, because we put a little bit more detail into the first one, but we did pull everything back just so every lot could kind of get a little bit of a view of what, if you're, walking on the street, you're going to be kind of visualizing.
Can you just say which lots they are, what
Oh,
road
yeah,
they're on,
I'm
if
sorry.
you don't mind?
Yeah, sure. I'm sorry about that. So this is lot 1. This is the first one coming up. This is the one that we did show, the septic off to the side, it's storages, and we do have the raised areas where we do have some plantings around. Some of the
That's the
comments.
corner of Trout Brook and Claybrook.
Yes. And that's lot 1 and lot 2. I'll skip over right to that one. Lot 2 is the one next door to it. So these are the first two right there, lot 1 and 2 that we're showing, both with like their raised areas at the front with the retaining walls and the plantings around those.
And
lots.
I know there's been a lot of chatter on the chat, and we are all professionals here. And what I had said was that some of the lots have raised septic, some of the lots have showing foundations. So
Mhm.
what we've chosen to do on our foundations, unlike some of the neighbors, rather than just having the bottom of the foundation out, is we are screening our foundations with shrubbery and and with walls.
Right. And bringing up the retaining walls to block that, so you're not having a big drop down from the front of the house down to the yard. And then we actually, as we go on to, I'll go to the next lot 4, because that's on that same area. This is one of the ones that doesn't actually have any of the retaining walls. It's a pretty level as it goes like around the yard. For this one, and we do have lot 45 also. That's the one that does have the most in the front for the retaining wall. Also in that one, blocking the steps coming in for that one around the view of the house. And this one also has been pulled back to the street, just so you kind of get, this is the one that's the closest to the lot, so you can kind of get the idea of what the street view would be from this, for this one as well.
And that's just preliminary landscaping to show what could be possible. It's not, doesn't mean there's gonna be more added.
Yes, this is just for an example to get, kind of a visual of what possibilities are. Would you like me, I don't know if you wanted to walk through any of the layout designs. I know mainly since the last meeting, the concerns were the view from the road and how like large everything would feel. But if you'd like me to go through some of the designs, I'm happy to go through and walk through some of the layouts as well.
One thing I wanted to ask was whether the applicant would object on the affordable unit to having the second floor finished the same way as the comparable market rate unit.
Yes, and I don't know why we would do that. The state has requirements for size of units, and we are hundreds of feet larger than what the state requirements are for a 4-bedroom home.
Just seems to me that the bedrooms on the second floor of the affordable unit are a lot smaller than they would be on the market rate.
Yes, we have less square footage finished on the second floor with this space open. But we do still meet 4 bedrooms that are actually good size, and all meet requirements. They don't hit any minimums, so they actually do have 4 decent bedrooms still on that plan.
Yeah, and they're well in excess of what sanitary code requirements are, as well as the state minimums for unit sizes. The
You can compare over to the second floor if you just want to flip back to see the two.
How much difference does that make in cost of construction?
For construction costs, I mean, it's less heating and conditioning for over this area, so that does help with that. And like the less finishing there, this would be available for unfinished storage space for them. As far as like the exterior views, the goal was to keep making sure that everything from the outside of the homes looked the same, so that's where we kind of end up with some of that space.
And as far as economics for the project, you cannot build a home for $300,000 or $350,000, which is what this affordable home is going to be sold for. It is going to be a beautiful home and a wonderful opportunity for a low income family, but we have to make economic choices throughout the development process. And one of those choices is to not finish space so that at the end of the day, the economics are going to balance out.
Okay,
I was gonna say, and at the end of the day, I mean, people can choose to build out space. They just won't be reimbursed for it when they sell the unit. And sometimes people do choose to do that. But we think having that space upstairs, since there won't be a basement is also a wonderful opportunity for storage as well.
Mhm. And they do have the basement space down below, but it's nice to not have to sneak up into it.
It looks like Cliff would like to add something.
Oh,
yeah, Cliff, go ahead.
Actually, I was going to say almost exactly what Lynn said, is that the unfinished storage, I think at the last hearing, there may have been a suggestion made that that space be, the ceiling or the roof be supported by trusses that would preclude an option of finishing that space
mhm.
in the future. I think I'd recommend the opposite, that it be unfinished if that's what makes the numbers work, but retain the option that a family in the future could turn it into a study or enlarge their master bedroom, which is what the plan is in the market rate units. The difference in cost isn't just bedroom size, it's also the bathrooms are different. And so that's all I would say, is I think having that ability to potentially improve it in the future would be a nice thing for the owner.
Yeah, I do want to again reiterate that there is no intention to have those spaces be bedrooms. And we have no issue with that being a condition of the permit as well.
I'm sorry, can you say that again?
Those spaces are not meant to be bedrooms. We don't want to put something in, I understand what Cliff was saying, and I appreciate what he was saying about being able to finish the space, but it's for a study, it's for a rec room, it's for storage. We are not, there is no intention of making more bedrooms in these homes.
Correct. And I know we do have some finished basement space in some of the units. This unit doesn't have finished basement, but we have bonus rooms. And some of them do have windows, but we are not proposing any window wells or egress windows for those either. So there would be no possibility for basement bedrooms as well.
Cliff, I wanted to ask your comment. Were you saying that there are trusses that prevent that unfinished space from being?
No, we don't really know at this point, but in the last hearing, I think there was a suggestion that was made out of concern for converting that space into a bedroom. And I think there was, I don't remember who it was, I'd have to look back at my notes, but I think there was a suggestion to support the roof in a way that would make it virtually, well, certainly very impractical to finish. And I think I was just recommending the contrary, that I think it should be framed the way the other ones are framed, so that there is actually the potential to enhance the master bedroom or create a study area. Certainly not adding bedrooms, which would not work with the septic plans.
Yeah, Cliff, I gotta say, I don't recall that conversation about the trusses, so I think that there is no intention to have any different structural supports in the affordable units versus the market rate units, so we can kind of close out this discussion.
Great.
Okay, Nadir, you want to say something?
Yeah, just curious, given the proximity, the house being built to the street, and then those windows along the front of that, the sort of windows on top of the garage, isn't the unfinished space going to be visible from the road? So if you're walking by, you'd see that sort of is an unfinished space within that sort of window.
You could see, we have had sometimes contractors would actually will do something to kind of like put a blocker up so it doesn't look like that you're looking into it too all the time to like avoid that space. But there is the possibility to be able to see through if we didn't do something to block the back of that for the unfinished space.
Because my sense, right, is that the property needs to look the same from the outside,
Right.
as affordable to non-affordable. That would be kind of a distinction that would be noticeable from the outside.
Yeah, correct. If we had taken out that window, that would make a difference, which I think the goals are to try to keep everything similar in view. So we would want to keep that on there.
So Aaron, when you say the contractor could put a blocker up, what's a blocker?
Sorry, I don't have a specific on it. I have had some of them say that they would put almost like a backing so that you're not looking through into the storage. I'm not sure if what specific material they would use, but I've had a couple of them comment it to me because they've had areas where they do have like an overlay, and you are trying to avoid that where you're looking into it.
So I think they like could put glaze or
like a
something
glaze
on the back of the window.
Correct.
It's a covering on the window.
Yes, yeah, to avoid you from being able to look through.
So if you were to do that, would you do it for the market rate unit as well?
The market rate unit's gonna have a bedroom there, so they're gonna have their bedroom space. It's not almost, if you think of it as like either like Lynn said, like glazing, or even obviously you could do like a curtain or something like that there, but that is a bedroom at that point in the front. So we'd still have like you'd still want the window to have the still glass to be able to see through.
Well, I'm just following up on Nadir's comment. If the units affordable and market rate are supposed to look the same from the outside, if you put some kind of material on the affordable unit window but not on the market rate, then they don't look the same.
Why don't we just put honeycomb shades or something on the windows? I mean, this doesn't seem like that
Right.
complicated.
Right.
Yeah, it's
Right.
on the inside, not on the outside.
Yeah, it's not an
That's what I'm
outside
saying.
covering.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then no
so
one's gonna see it, and it'll just look like a window with.
Or a shade or something
on
like
it.
that on it. Mm-hmm.
Now, I'm just asking. I don't know what
Mm-hmm.
how it would work.
Right. No, nothing that would look different from the outside. It would just look like a shade from the inside. That would be blocking, just like you would have a curtain or something closed from the inside.
Cliff, do you have any comment on that issue?
I'm supporting the shade on the inside as opposed to putting any film on the window.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sorry, you say not a film on the window?
Right.
Not a film on the window. That's what
shade.
Just an interior shade as you'd have on any normal room window.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
But then that would sort of require that the person, in order to maintain kind of the quality of the visual, to constantly leave that shade down.
Most people are going to put window treatments or shades in their homes for privacy, and I feel like this is a level of detail I understand, you know, what you're saying, and certainly we need to run everything by mass housing again, you know, before we go and get a building permit. But I think that this is sort of been, you know, asked and answered at this point. You know,
I mean,
you walk
I
around the
think-
neighborhood, everybody does something a little bit different with regard to what they do inside the home.
Lynn, have you got an extra advisor there you need to identify for the record?
I'm sorry. Zoya just loves you guys a lot, so she always comes to say hello.
Okay, what I want to do at this point, just the board members, any other comments on what we've been discussing? What I'd like to do is open it up for comments from members of the public who are tuning in.
No, Alan, can I ask a quick question?
Sure.
I very much appreciate sort of the right sizing or the sort of different vantage point on those facades, front facade images. I'm curious if you do have any that perhaps show the lot 1A and 2A from the street, kind of where the septic's is raised, because it seems like that's sort of a different view that I think we've been able to see from.
I can show you the lot 1. We did explore trying to show you both of them together, and the tough thing was, how do you show that panorama and actual perspective? You know, like if you're standing on the road, it would be a little hard to get that view in your eye line. Let me go back just to lot 1, because lot 1 was the one that we were able to at least kind of put a little bit more detail in. Second, here we go. And let me zoom in a little bit more on this rendering for you too. Okay, that one zooms in a little bit more. And like I said, I wasn't able to get both of them into the one view to see, but this is the one that kind of gives you the most detailed view as far as the information and adding in the extra details, the extra information into the lot.
And sorry, which lot is this?
This is lot 1.
So then the
Yep.
septic system's to the right.
Yeah.
It looks on the drawings that the septic system sits in front of where the house is, whereas in this, it looks like the septic system's behind kind of the front line of the house. Or am I
hang on, let me pull up the other one.
looking at this, thinking of this backwards?
Sorry, I might be looking at it backwards. Let me pull up the site plan too. I don't have the site open in front of me. Dan, do you have the site open in front of you as far as the opposition for the two?
Yes, you'd have to stop sharing so I could put it.
Oh,
up.
I'm sorry.
So this is the front of, basically the two septic systems are to the right of lot 1, the one house as you're looking at it. So this would be the front driveway wall of the house here. And then, yes, those two walls sit a little forward of that. They're 10 feet behind the lot line. So the walls around the septic systems will be about 20 feet behind the pavement.
And can we see any of that from what Aaron was showing us? Because I didn't see that.
I don't.
Hang on one second. I think we have, I'm gonna say this is lot 1. I can go back on show lot 1. Sorry. That's lot 1.
So all the septic would be to the right of what's shown in the image there, correct?
Kind of forward, right?
This is over here, Dan.
Correct.
So that's the very corner of the septic?
Right. I just wanted to see if I had what we had for lot 2, if that helped compare. Lot 2 doesn't have it in as much detail. It was just lot 1 that we were able to get that much in. Sorry, I'll switch back over.
So the septic isn't mounted? It doesn't have to be a mounted system?
It is
There's no
mounted.
wall around it?
It looks like it's raised a foot or two.
It's equal,
here.
even house. It looks like it's even with the house.
When you compare it to the elevation of the garage on lot one, the mound of the septic system is about 2.5 feet above the garage,
Mhm,
Yeah, doesn't look it.
about the height of a table.
mhm.
Hmm.
Again, these kind of for reference in a sense too, you know, to sort of give some of an idea of that massing once we actually get into doing, like we said, detailing exactly how it can go together. And the plantings that we can put around it.
So if you look at the elevation of the entry area there above that short retaining wall, that's more or
Mhm.
less the elevation of the top of the septic system.
To kind of carry across.
Yes,
Sorry, that how far back from the street is that going to be? You said it was, I think,
20
10
feet from the pavement.
20 feet from the pavement.
Mhm.
And this house
Had-
is 30, close to 30 feet, right? Is I think what was said.
Yeah, we
earlier.
have about 32, from the average grade, we have about 32 feet, a little over 32 feet from the average grade.
So, Dan, from where the driveway starts to, or where the garage is it going to be parallel with the garage or forward of the garage
It's forward of the garage.
by about 10 feet?
Closer to 15.
Mhm.
But it's off to the side, you know, so there's a gap between the house and the septic system itself. Probably 15 feet or so before that retaining wall starts.
So this perspective doesn't really accurately show that.
It's a little, we could put a little bit more into it to get it a little bit closer to where Dan's at.
Yeah, unfortunately, we're sorry. We weren't
Mhm.
able to get more detail on that. But I think that because it shows the retaining wall on the other side, it does give a sense of what the height might look like, but it's pretty far away from the house. It's not right on top of the house.
After being at the site walk and seeing the wetlands and the condition of the lots, it's hard for one like myself to envision this house on those lots. It's just hard to envision.
What do you mean by that, Lauren?
Well, they get the nice grass and the beautiful thing and the retaining wall over here in the house, but you know, all I can picture is those trees all falling down and the woods all covered with water and the trees every place. That's all I can picture in my head. I'm having a hard time envisioning that. They did the same thing to my next door neighbor. They cut all of the trees off the lawn and mounded it up about 12 feet to make you should drive down there and look at 9 Old Meadow Road and you can see what the building in that wetlands there looks like. It's pretty amazing, actually. But I'm having a hard time looking at the picture and envisioning a final product.
Can I ask one more question? For the I'm gonna use all the wrong terms, but the water drainage that along the front of 1A and 2A,
Yes.
you know, it seems like there's sort of a plan to sort of direct the water kind of to kind of continue in the way that it's currently doing. Is there any concern that the water is going to sort of continue into kind of Claybrook because the sort of the natural, or is there something that's going to kind of pull it back onto the lot itself?
Which
Because
lot are you thinking of?
I'm thinking of like 1A, 2A, right? So I think I heard the sort of plan kind of bringing it across the top like it currently goes. And the idea is that, you know, sort of now there's going to be this buildup from the sort of raised septic systems and of course the property, the houses themselves. But then as you kind of, you know, if the water is coming towards, you know, down Trout Brook towards Claybrook, is there any concern that it's going to just end up on Claybrook?
No, so if you see this contour line here that looks like a diamond.
Yep.
There's a crest in Trout Brook Road. So that's a high point in Trout Brook Road. So everything to the right of that diamond sheds to the right. And it actually sheds right off the pavement into this little floodplain area here.
Yep.
Everything to the left of the diamond flows down along either side of Trout Brook Road. And then in our case, it's traveling along the edge of the pavement here until you get right around here. And then it comes off the pavement and travels in the grass strip and at the edge of our lot and flows down right into the wetland area, like right here. So
But I guess what I'm, yeah, oh, sorry.
So basically what we do with the additional grading specifications that Tetra Tech requested in through here, is basically going to ensure that that exact same thing happens, that the water will come along here. Once we get past this driveway, it's going to come right across the shoulder of the road into our lots, and then it's going to run right along parallel into the same floodplain area that it runs into today. It would not, Claybrook Road is elevated above this whole floodplain area by 2 feet or so.
Okay.
So all this water ends up down into this little floodplain area and then migrates down towards the wetland. And that's what happens today. Because this whole core area is elevated above the road. It's not like this runoff runs through these areas that we're proposing for developing. It kind of runs along this side of the road until it gets down into this low area.
But when the site is developed, you're gonna put in whatever culvert or cement or directional sort of things that
Just a grass graded area.
grass graded area, okay.
Okay, what I'd like to do, as I said, is to see what comments or questions members of the public who are in attendance might have. I see that Tracy Mannion has raised her hands. You want to go ahead?
Yes, thank you so much for letting me speak. I'm actually the abutter to lots 1 and 2. So I do have a lot of questions. I grew up here. I know these lots like the back of my hand. I've been in this neighborhood my entire life. I am concerned about the water runoff that has been spoken about here, because that water that's running down Trout Brook and taking a left onto Claybrook, going into those wetlands is abutting my property and my driveway. And like I said, I do know the water leveling here. You might want to come down and see it. It's very high right now. And this isn't uncommon. It does happen in this town. I've seen it happen for over 50 years. So that's one of my concerns, is how are we going to protect the height of the water being forced towards my property, because these are raised lots. I do know a bit about construction and septics. These are raised very high. I'm also interested in seeing the height of the wall, the renderings of the height of the wall looking from Claybrook Road. I'm not talking about looking from my property. I'm talking about walking down the street and seeing what this looks like. I know there was a comment made earlier that there's quite a bit of vegetation there, but to be honest, the types of trees that are growing there are not large as far as their circumference. They're very tall and thin trees, so you really can see a lot through there. I would love to see some renderings of if you were walking down Claybrook, what it looks like to look to the right at this septic system, how high it will be, because my understanding is with the height of these lots and the raised septic, that wall may be actually quite high. And I would definitely like to see some kind of shrubbery around that. It is a scenic road. It's one of the only scenic roads we actually have in this area. And I would like to protect that if possible. You know, when I bought this lot, I grew up around the corner, but when I bought this lot, that was considered an unbuildable lot. So I think a lot of our concerns from the community are that we thought these were unbuildable lots and now they're buildable. So we do have a lot of questions. We do have a lot of concerns about how it will look. It doesn't mean we're against 40Bs. It just means that we have been here a very long time, and this has come as a surprise to us that this can actually happen. So thank you for your consideration to my questions.
Tracy, what is your address?
I'm 90 Claybrook Road, right next to lots 1 and 2.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else have questions or comments? Don't be afraid. Yes. Someone from Dover.
Valerie Lynn, 14 Haven Terrace. I have a question. So It looks like right now, most of these lots are quite heavily wooded, but as you develop those, a lot of those trees will be removed. And right now and because of the significant wetlands, a lot of those trees are kind of helping to mitigate the amount of water that's in that area. So once you remove those trees, that water is no longer being managed in the same way it is today. So how does that get accounted for in the grading and engineering as you develop these?
John, do you want to address that?
Yeah, if you're referring, are you referring to like evapotranspiration that happens from the trees and that lost? Well, so evapotranspiration happens from trees and it happens from grass. In fairness, the stormwater standards don't deal with that as far as sort of any sort of quantitative compensation. It's relatively small when we're considering flood impacts, because if you can think about it, most of the flooding impacts that occur during rain are due to just the intensity of rainfall and how much comes at once. So when you look at sort of the relatively modest way evapotranspiration works, those changes are pretty minute in comparison. Dan, feel free to add if I got anything that you don't agree with.
No, I agree completely.
And then as a follow-up, for the runoff from the roofs, how is that being managed? Because I know with these recent storms that we've had, for several people who have roof drainage that's going into, I don't know, some sort of a holding facility or something. A lot of those are not actually functioning in the way that I think that they were initially designed for. They're overflowing, they're backing up. So I'm just curious how how that roof drainage is being managed on these homes.
Dan or somebody on your side want to address that?
Well, we have underground stormwater infiltration systems proposed on each lot, and they're sized and designed, principally to mitigate the more common storms. And like all drainage systems in larger storm events, they will overflow, and they're designed to overflow at the gutter downspouts around the house, and then they would just flow overland towards the wetland areas.
Yeah, and I'd add to that too. A lot of what you see perhaps are sort of undersized systems. So the systems that the applicant has shown on these are sized according to standards in the handbook, and they're quite large. We've also asked them to exclusively have them deal with roof runoff. So what happens then is a lot of the contaminants that usually get in and choke these systems out are usually from at-grade portions that drain to them, and we've asked them to not include those. So these should last a lot longer, and they're sized much larger than you'd typically see.
So, but isn't the water table in this area higher? So I guess I'm just thinking, if you've already got kind of a high water table and now you're pouring more water onto it, I don't know, it just seems like it's higher propensity for flooding, correct?
No, just the opposite. So by introducing the water to the ground instead of discharging at the surface, you're actually preventing flooding. I wouldn't say preventing.
But if the ground is already saturated, right, there's nowhere for it to go. So it bubbles up to the surface anyways.
Not well, so there are requirements within the stormwater standards that you maintain a minimum separation from groundwater. So there was some discussion early on about where the groundwater elevation was, and they've documented that. There are considerations for that, but overwhelmingly infiltration is better for everything, and it is absolutely better to reduce flooding to infiltrate water into the ground rather than letting it discharge over the surface. Because what you're doing is you're making it much slower than so flooding's created when you have too much water all at once. In this case, what we're doing is we're spreading it out and introducing it into the ground rather than letting it flow over the surface with all the rest of the water that's creating the flooding.
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks, Val. Anyone else?
Hi, Ed Egan,
Egan.
82 Claybrook Road.
Go ahead.
I'm across the street from Claybrook and Troutbrook. And Alan, I submitted some questions. I don't know if you got them. And those were my concerns. I'm very concerned with the environmental impact from this project on the neighborhood. Specifically water displacement, as was just brought up, flooding, well contamination. I have a shallow well. And the environmental impact on the wetlands and the streams in that area. And I don't feel the questions that I sent have been answered. Specifically, how much landfill is going to be brought in? And I thought tonight we would get to see a picture of those two houses side by side and the two septic systems off to the right there. And I thought we'd get to see a picture from the street grade. And that's what I thought we were going to get to see tonight, or a rendering of that. And we still don't see that. I hear, they say the septic's going to be 5 to 6 feet, and then it's 2 to 3 feet, and I also don't feel the lots are big enough to displace all the water. If you went over there today, and I know it's been wet, there's always standing water there. I mean, and now we're going to have a house, and a house doesn't absorb water. A driveway doesn't absorb water. It's got to go somewhere. And I'm thinking of myself, and I'm also thinking of Tracy, because I'm feeling that she's going to get flooded out. So that's my concern, the environmental impact, and where's this water all going to go? And if you want, I sent the questions in. If you want to give to whoever should answer those questions and they want to get back to me in writing, that'd be great as well. So either way.
Well, it doesn't quite work that way.
Okay.
We have a public hearing process, and we can address those issues during the hearing. And as I said earlier, it would have been helpful to get the questions earlier, because I myself haven't, we received, I don't know how many emails today, but quite a few, and I haven't had time to read them all.
Okay.
I'm sure everybody else hasn't either, but we'll try and consider them. What'll happen?
Well,
Go ahead.
I'm sorry. I apologize for interrupting. I sent them before we had the walkthrough. Like, I sent the questions then.
Okay.
It's okay. But so my question is, how much landfill?
We shared your questions with our consultants, so I think they have considered them, and in their reports have tried to address them. Maybe not specifically with answers to your specific questions, but Sean, do you have any comments on what Mr. Egan has just said about water displacement and well contamination?
We'll take the water displacement first. So the stormwater handbook is sort of the engineer's Bible for managing everything related to stormwater. It established the standards for documentation, for investigation, and for how you quantify all the impacts. And what we use, that's our tool for determining whether they've done things appropriately, and they've met the requirements of that. The well contamination, that is such a sort of there are infinite ways of that could pose as a risk, and infinite ways of things could present as problems. So I don't have any information in order to offer any guidance on that, other than there's nothing being used at the site that would present a risk to your well. The septic systems, again, similarly, are all designed according to Title V standards, which are rigorous standards created by the state, specifically to protect wells. And that's why you have, for example, 100-foot separation requirements from your wells and any septic systems. So again, there are regulations, or there are standards in place that, if properly applied, ensure that those negative outcomes don't happen. And we've reviewed them according to those guidance documents and those regulations, and feel that they comply with them.
Are these issues that would have to be looked at by the Concom when the matter gets to them?
Well, so the Concom's a little bit different, right? Because Concom doesn't deal with septic systems and does deal with it in stormwater on a peripheral basis. It is part of their review, but overwhelming, their concern is going to be for the resource areas and protecting the resource areas. Now, the resource areas, the reason they're protected is because they serve critical functions for protecting the things like Mr. Egan said. The wetlands are vital to mitigating in stormwater quality. So they're huge filtering mechanisms. They're protections for your water supply. So the reason the wetlands are protected is because they do all those good things.
And what about the Board of Health? I'm still not totally clear myself on exactly how the Board of Health reviews and addresses these kinds of issues.
Well, the Board of Health is charged with administering the requirements of Title V. For those who don't know, those are the regulations for how you design septic systems. The Board of Health is the agent that has to review and approve those, they call them septic system construction plans. So any septic system, anything that's designed to discharge wastewater to the ground from a single family home is reviewed by the local Board of Health for compliance with those regulations. And they're about 100 pages, 120 pages of guidance from everything from how steep you slope your pipes to how big your septic tank needs to be to how many lines you can come out of your distribution box, how your leaching trenches need to be designed. That's why what we asked in our last comment round was for the applicant to provide some basic information regarding how their systems are being designed so that we could vet that through to make sure what they're showing was reasonably sized. And they did that last time, and we checked those numbers and they seem in line with what our expectations were. That being said, the Board of Health is the final determiner for compliance. They will review a detailed set of design plans prior to any building permit being issued, and those design plans have to explicitly comply with everything in Title V.
And is that
Sean,
sorry, different in the context of a 40B process where kind of a waiver is issued, or is that because what I would like to make sure we're not doing is sort of through the course of this waiver process, sort of then removing some sort of authority from kind of the other bodies that would otherwise look at these things and outside of this context.
No, so to be clear, 40B has no impact on Title V or the Wetland Protection Act. Now, there are sometimes local add-ons to those regulations, but the process is defined in the Wetlands Protection Act, and the process is defined in the Title V regulations, and all the requirements therein apply regardless of what happens at the ZBA.
So Sean, you looked over the plans, and do you see my concern as far as the environmental impact on the wetland streams, my well, everyone's wells in the neighborhood, flooding? Because my backyard and my side yard, right now, I really couldn't walk out there. There's inches of water, and there's no construction there at this time. That's why I asked last time in my notes. I asked how much landfill is going to be brought in. At what grade will these houses be built? At what grade will the wall be? I think it was Peter or some Jonathan. He showed us the Google Maps of my neighbor to my left, and he has a retaining wall around his septic system. I mean, are they going to look like that? I mean, that's about 4 feet high, 5 feet high.
They're going to look similar. Now, all of that information is shown on the plans now, because the plans are difficult to read. Obviously, for me, I've had 35 years at this, so there are contours, there are wall symbols. So all of that, to my eye, I can see it and I can understand how high things are. I know it's not a reasonable expectation for a layperson, but the information is on the plans. One of the other things we asked was for them to do to your point about how much fill and how much, we asked them to do a table of a summary of their cuts and fills. So that's been added as well. So the plans show how many cubic yards are being brought in and how much cubic yards has to be excavated. Make no mistake about it. If your property is wet now, it will continue to be wet. There's nothing mitigative about what they're proposing, but I'm also reasonably certain because they comply with the standards, there's also nothing negative that should result from the project. I mean, they're doing everything that they're required to do. But they're not doing anything that's sort of gonna help things by any stretch of the imagination.
But after I know what I have now, but after they're built, I have no recourse. I'm done. And this is my home and I have nowhere to go. I mean, as far as, if my house gets flooded, and also Tracy, I'm very concerned about her as well. What do we do if this is all hearsay? I respect Dan. He's trying to explain where the water's going to go. Well, in a good storm, it doesn't look like there's enough there to absorb all this water. now that you've got two properties and you've got two septic systems on there. So where does it leave us? You know, we're stuck.
Yeah,
Okay, thank you.
yeah, it's in the scheme of flooding, in the scheme of wetland survival, these sites are relatively small. So I really don't expect anything happening on these sites to fundamentally alter anything that you're experiencing.
I don't know if Dan wants to speak to it, because I know Dan looked up some of the parcels around us that we had gotten some letters on. And I think that some of the sites flow different directions from where we are. And Dan, I don't know if this is one of them. I may be wrong.
No, you're referring to another comment that was received today from a different neighborhood, actually.
Okay, never mind.
And Lynn, I will comment just real quickly. I saw in the recent comments that were submitted some concern about culvert blockages. And I can tell you without question, an inoperable or a blocked culvert is an absolute problem for flooding. So far more than anything that's ever going to happen on these sites, even an inch of sediment in a culvert is going to fundamentally change flow patterns and fundamentally change flood elevations. So if there's a concern for flooding in the neighborhood, then it's the focus should, I would suggest, be more on the maintenance of existing infrastructure than on the changes that are proposed as part of the project, because any compromise of that infrastructure is going to absolutely result in an increase in flooding.
And that has nothing to do with the proposed construction?
Well, it shouldn't, right? But if the construction's not executed properly and they leave some tree slag around or stockpile things in the wrong spot, absolutely they can have a negative effect. But the process of building the homes and installing the septic systems, no.
I think that if there's an issue with the culverts today, then that's a conversation for neighbors to have with the DPW about getting them cleaned out and maintained. We will have very strict standards with regard to the Conservation Commission. We're going to have to put up either compost socks or hay bales or whatever to protect, what is going to run off from our site, so that, to prevent those things from happening. There's going to be a lot of eyes on this project between the Conservation Commission and the Board of Health.
And just, Linda, one point, there is a drain line, at least one drain line that runs through your through one of your parcels through an easement. So there is a piece of public infrastructure that drains through. I forget which lot it was, but it might be lot 4.
It's lot 45.
45.
Okay. Peter Hoffman, do you want to say something?
Yes, thank you. I'd like to start by saying how grateful we are to the town volunteers. We know this isn't any fun. After watching these for however many months this has been going on, certainly it's not fun for anybody, and we appreciate your service. I've got a couple questions. First is, I'm not quite clear about the comments that we said, and you yourself told me that I should submit comments by today, and that's what I did. I submitted them yesterday and the day before. And you're going to try to read them, or I mean, I can read them into the record right now if that would help.
No, you
Or
don't need
it's
to read them into the record.
I'm sorry?
You don't need to read them into the record.
Okay, it is. They are in the record then, right?
Yes.
Okay, great. Also, my understanding is, as we're talking about how it meets all these strict standards, the project meets all these strict standards for wetlands and groundwater and everything, septic, then why is it necessary to seek waivers of what I recall was, I believe, the developer seeking the waiver of the entire wetlands protections of our local regulations. They're seeking waivers of zoning. They're seeking waivers of septic. So can we talk about which waivers those are and why they have to get them? Because I think nobody knows better than our Dover government all the water problems we've been having. And there's a very specific reason. We have a great system in Massachusetts, town meetings, very democratic, small d democratic. We have a very involved town, and we've been very focused on water, issues of water quality in towns, specifically over the last several years. We've had major problems with Aquarian, which, by the way, is an abutting property. And their well provides water to every home down on Juniper Street. So really, we ought to be counting all those homes as abutters. I guess then I guess I would like to see if you could respond to that first, and then may follow up.
Lynn, do you want to address the issue of the waivers that the applicant is requesting?
I think I'm gonna let Jonathan speak to the waiver list, but in reality, I think we have like only about 8 waivers. We have a very few waivers that we have asked for. At the end of the day, under Chapter 40B, our requirements are to comply with state requirements. And with regard to the wetlands, we have paid for, in the town, the ZBA has hired a peer reviewer that has spoken and reviewed the state regulations for the wetlands. Some of our basic waivers, and Jonathan, I just resent the waiver list in case you can't put your finger on it. Basically just has to do with, I think actually we comply with, many of the setbacks. So if you feel, Mr. Chairman, that you want to go through the waiver list now, we're happy to walk through the waiver list.
Well, I don't think it's an unreasonable request from Mr. Hoffman to do that. So the board does need to address them, and I don't think we've really discussed them at any length. So
Sure, we figured we would get to that after we got through some of the public comment and the correspondence of today. I guess we thought that's the way we'd be ending the meeting. But if you want to go through them now, we're prepared to go through them now.
Yeah, this is a good time.
Sean, did you want to say something?
Yeah, I just want to make sure, just partly to answer Mr. Hoffman's question, but to make sure this process is the comprehensive permit process, which is the review by the ZBA of a preliminary plan. So these are not final plans. So we just want to make sure we're respectful of the processes that are to come, which is the Board of Health still has their process relative to the septic design. The Conservation Commission still has their process relative to compliance with the Wetlands Protection Act. My review is not their review. My review is to serve the ZBA, to make sure that what's shown on the plans that the ZBA is seeing is reflective of what I think is a project that could comply with the permit, that could comply with those regulations. So for example, I saw something on the plans that suggested to me that, hey, the plans as drawn are not going to pass the Concom's review for compliance with the Wetlands Protection Act. They need to show the additional compensatory storage to reflect the plan, to show the ZBA a plan that reflects the actual project that's likely to be approved when gone through those processes. So Peter, to your other question about the things that the applicant is waiving relative to wetlands and relative to septic systems at the Board of Health, I'm not sure of those waivers, but they can't waive any portion of the underlying state regulations in the underlying septic system regulations.
So Dan and John, do you want me to bring up the waiver list and we can walk through it? Jonathan and Dan, you're still here, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
I didn't know, Mr. Chair, is that the end of the public comment, or do you want us to go through the waiver list now?
No, we can finish public comments, but because the issue's been raised, I think it's appropriate to go ahead and review them.
I certainly agree.
Okay. Dan, I think the first one is yours. So basically, under the definitions, it seems like one of our lot 1A is narrower than, the frontage is less than what is required under the bylaw. Dan, is that correct?
Yeah, honestly, I didn't spruce up on these things, so I'm not.
I know, that's why I brought it up. It says frontage, no lot shall be narrower than its minimum required frontage between such right-of-way line and the
So the
perfect
issue there,
square.
Lynn, is not lack of frontage, it's that the lot narrows a bit.
Correct.
At a point, so that it doesn't have uniform width of the required frontage, front to back.
And the frontage for lot 1 is on Claybrook. So I think it's the location of the septic system for lot 2, where we have that little bump out that generates that waiver request.
Yeah. And I guess I want to just back up, Lynn, before we go through each one, and note that we are asking for 4 zoning waivers. I have never, in my almost 30-year career, experienced a 40B project that has required so few waivers as this one. So I think it's just important to set the threshold. Usually it is a project proposing 200 units in a single family zone on a 5-acre lot where multifamily isn't even allowed, and multi-fam and the density is 20 times what's permitted. So I think it's important to keep a little bit of a perspective, and I think some of the other professionals, including Sean and Cliff, could probably confirm that. So yes, that's the first waiver. Some of our lots, not all of them, 3 of the 4 lots have less than the required front setback. That's been discussed already. And that's due to the topography of the lot, and the soil conditions. So even if a variance were required, that likely would be justification for one, but a variance is not required. And then 2 of the lots require side setback relief.
And just, what a setback, what the front setback means is it's from the front of a lot to where the building is. So on a couple of the lots, the buildings are a little bit closer to the front. And on a couple of the lots, there is a smaller reduction from the building to the side lot line.
Well, it's not just a small reduction, Lynn. I think it's from 40 feet to 20 feet for at least some of them, isn't that right?
On one of the lots, it's 20. On the other 3, it's around 30 for the front setback. The side yard setback waivers are between the houses on 1 and 2, and it's only a foot less than what is otherwise required.
And those are our houses, right?
Correct, between our houses.
Our own lots.
Yeah.
Can I ask though, if I'm understanding correctly, based on the way that I guess it's lot 1A, right? It no longer has any frontage on Trout Brook. It's now only frontage is on Claybrook. Is that right? So then or is that now the side? So are you measuring from Claybrook as kind of the frontage or as the side?
For lot 1, the front setback is from Claybrook.
Do you want me to unshare so you can show him it on the plan? Would that be helpful?
Sure.
Okay.
So on lot 1, the frontage is on Claybrook. So the front yard setback is measured to Claybrook. So we meet that.
Yeah.
And then on these, so for lot 2, the required setback is 40, we're at 32. And then on these 2, we have side setbacks. This required side setback is 30 feet. So this is technically a side, which you're staring at the front of lot 1. It's technically a side yard. So that's 17.2. And then between the 2 houses, it's 29.1 for both instead of 30.
Are you okay if we go back to the waiver list now?
Yes.
Okay. If we didn't have Zoom, we couldn't do this, back and forth. It's quite interesting. All right. So do you want to go to the perfect square?
Well, I think there's also the site access.
This is next.
Oh, yeah, sorry, I missed that one. Yeah, so one of the lots, lot 1A, again, has that perfect square requirement that isn't satisfied. There is not a 150-foot square portion of the lot, and that is a requirement of the bylaw. Then 1A and 2A are sharing access. That reduces the number of curb cuts, obviously, but that is something that typically would require planning board approval, but because of the comprehensive permit, everything goes through the board. So that's it for zoning.
Just really quickly, Jonathan, if you can. So can't make the perfect square do you have kind of what is the kind of perfect square it can make if it's not 150 by 150? Or how close are we?
You want to unshare?
Yeah, it's let in.
Yeah, I think it's because of the jog with the septic.
Yeah, it's this jog right here. Right, so we have from the corner of the jog to this lot line, it's 126. So there's this little jog where the septic for lot 2 is going is precluding that 150 by 150 square from fitting in this area.
But again, other than that sort of unique feature of the septic for the adjoining lot being pushed over to where it is, I think that site would satisfy the perfect square requirement. So then we're seeking a waiver from the local wetlands bylaw. And we've had some pretty detailed conversations from both.
It's just a procedural waiver.
Right.
Because 40B.
So all of the work is going to be permitted, and as has been discussed, we have not and could not request waivers from the State Wetlands Protection Act or the regulations thereunder. We'll have to go to the Conservation Commission and get an order of conditions from them and demonstrate to the Conservation Commission compliance with those regulations. And there's been a lot of discussion and detailed review by Mr. Reardon and discussion by Dan about how this project is not going to adversely impact the wetlands based upon the current design.
So Don, you're saying that this waiver is to get a waiver from local wetlands requirements to the extent that they exceed anything required under state law?
That's right.
Okay. Sean has his hand up.
John?
Yeah, and what we typically suggest that the ZBA does is get a comment from the Concom that if there's anything under the local bylaw that they want protected, that they just ask you to enforce that as a condition on the approval. So what we do like about blanket waivers from local bylaws is that it under 40B, the ZBA becomes a local permit granting authority. And if you don't waive the bylaw and its procedural requirements, then in theory, you'd have to issue a permit for wetlands, requiring your review of the wetlands, basically at the same time duplicating what the Conservation Commission has to do under the Wetlands Protection Act. So usually what we say is waive the wetlands bylaw, include any additional wetlands concerns that the commission would have under the local bylaw as a condition of approval, and then it gets administered that way.
So are you saying that if the Concom wants to require something more than is required under state law, that be made a condition of the permit?
Yeah, so for example, in Medway, they have I think it's a 25-foot no-touch zone around wetlands. In that doesn't exist under the Wetlands Protection Act, so there is no such thing as a no disturb zone. So what happened between the ZBA and the Conservation Commission there, in recognition of the 40B rules, the commission and the applicant agreed on a 15-foot no build zone rather than a 25-foot no build zone. So they had waived the requirement of the local wetlands regulations, but applied a 15-foot no disturb zone under the ZBA permit.
Yeah, if I could just cut in quickly, the Dover Wetlands Protection Bylaw is very bare bones, does not contain a lot of more stringent provisions. In fact, it's just a procedural bylaw. It requires a permit from it requires commission approval for work within 100 feet of a resource area or within 200 feet of a river or stream. That's pretty much coextensive with the Wetlands Protection Act. Unlike many wetlands protection bylaws, there's nothing in here that creates, a no disturb zone or treats the buffer area as a resource area. And so it's really just, it is mainly procedural.
Hey, John, this is Scott. So I'm the wetlands consultant on the project. I just wanted to pipe in here on this topic. So the Dover wetlands bylaw does have some fairly strict no disturb setbacks, both under their wetlands bylaws, but also the Board of Health has their setbacks for 100 feet to septic systems. So those setbacks would challenge these lots, which is the reason we had to include those waivers in here. So I believe it's a bit more than just procedural. We do need waivers from those setbacks.
Yeah, I don't think it's in the bylaw, in the wetlands bylaw, but I do know, and we haven't gotten into the request for waivers under the this stormwater. I'm not sure that we've gotten there, but maybe it's in the
It's the Board of Health regulations.
Well, Dan, did you have any thoughts on this topic? Because I believe we're going to be challenged by the Dover wetlands setbacks as well under their regs.
Yeah, basically the regulations call for limits of disturbance and limitations on tree removal that would basically preclude these lots from being developed. So they basically would interfere with the project in a substantial way, and that's why waivers are being requested from those requirements. And we're going to follow the state wetlands protection regulations.
Okay, more
That's my
waiver,
understanding as well, Dan.
back to the waiver list.
Okay, so we do need the waiver for the local wetland protection bylaw, which is why we're going to the state standard. The next one, I guess, has to do with locating trees, and I think we've agreed that as a condition, we will be locating trees. But it's at the next stage.
right. It's not in the plan content.
Yeah. And then specifically, and Dan, I don't know if you want to speak to this.
These
About
are the two provisions that basically would preclude the development of these lots. K1 and K2, which limits tree removal in buffer zones and also requires 50-foot no disturb zone to the edge of a wetland and no structures within 70 feet of the edge of a wetland. So those requirements would not allow this project to go forward.
And they're more strict than the state bylaw.
Yes, correct.
And moving on to the Board of Health regulations, I think the issues are also with setbacks.
Yeah, I'm not really prepared in detail on this, but Dover has some local septic regulations that are different than the state standards. And again, it's a similar circumstance where, you know, if you were to follow the local regulations, I don't think at least, you know, one or two of these lots would not be able to sustain a septic system, even though you can very readily construct a septic system that complies with state requirements.
The last one on the list there talks about garage grinders. What are those?
So garbage grinder. So
No,
if you have a
garage.
garbage
A disposal.
in your sink, which
Yeah.
by the way is a bad idea if you have a septic
Really bad.
system. So what the state standards say is that if you're going to have a garbage grinder in your sink in your kitchen, you have to increase the size of your septic system by 50%, because they are bad for septic systems. So
you got a typo on your chart there that says garage grinders.
it's garbage. It's supposed to be
Okay.
garbage.
And at the end of the day, we have no problem if there's a provision in our permit that does not that prohibits having a disposal. No problem there.
There won't be garbage disposals in these houses.
There will be none. Yeah.
Okay.
And I think that is really the end of the waiver list. So the couple of zoning bylaws and then the other regulations that are going to be handled at the state level. But locally reviewed, I will note, even though the wetlands is going to be reviewed by the Concom and the Title V septic system is going to be reviewed by the Board of Health.
Nadir, did you have something you wanted to say?
Yeah, I was just going to ask, you know, to the ones where, so K2, for example, the structure setback prohibition at 70 feet and the disturbance setback at 50 feet. Do you have a sense of what the state's requirement is for those?
There is no stated setback requirements for those provisions under the Wetlands Protection Act. So it's something that the Conservation Commission determines on a case-by-case basis under the Wetlands Protection Act, based on what's presented to them.
Got it. And is there a general kind of, you know, rule of thumb or sort of, you know, kind of historic average of what they tend to apply?
I don't know if Scott has some feedback on DEP and buffer zones. You know, I've seen DEP allows work within 15 feet, 10 feet of wetlands.
There's no strict setbacks under state law for buffer zone setbacks. They just want to ensure that there's no direct alteration to the wetlands. So effectively enough area for construction.
Right. And I guess one other thing I would point out is that, so this is under the Conservation Commission regulations, not under the town's wetland protection bylaw. And right in those regulations, it states that in the event that the applicant can demonstrate that no reasonable alternative exists and proposes to take all necessary measures to prevent short and long-term impacts to the wetland, the commission may, at its discretion, modify or waive this provision. So we've certainly demonstrated there's no reasonable alternative. And I think, given the peer review, I think you can satisfy yourself that we could seek a waiver even if we were proceeding to the Conservation Commission.
Okay. Other comments or questions? Tracy Mannion has her hand up.
Yes, thank you so much. Tracy Manning again, Claybrook Road. I'm wondering what our legal recourse is. I did type that into the questions. You know, if we're flooded or anything happens to our wells, there's a lot of wells. A lot of my neighbors' wells are of concern. Some have had to be replaced lately. Some are older, and they are not as deep, so it's definitely of concern to our entire community. I know water was mentioned. Could we discuss what happens if there is legal recourse? Do we go to the developer, the builder, their site? Is there any kind of warranty added here? Usually when there's a new build, it's about a 1-year warranty for a build. It's through the builder. What do we do here? Has this happened anywhere else? I'm not really sure who to direct this to, but thank you for letting me ask the question.
Sure. Happy to have you ask the question. I'm not sure we can give you an answer.
That's okay.
We're not in a position to give legal advice, I don't think. And I'm not sure what the answer to your question is anyway.
It might not be you, Ellen. It could be someone, it could be Sean, it could be, Lynn. I'm not really sure if this has happened before. Just curious. Thank you.
Does anybody have any comment in response to Ms. Mannion's question?
I can speak to it generally. Obviously, Mr. Chair, I'm not going to give legal advice to someone who's not my client, but I will say that as a general principle of real estate law, if one property owner causes damage to an abutting property owner, then that abutting property owner, if they can prove that what's happening is unreasonable and is causing a nuisance, they can file suit. But I think that's about as far as we can go. It's a very speculative. Anytime anyone's developing a piece of property, then an abutting property owner can always have some concern that even if all the regulations are being followed under state law and building code, there's nothing we can do to prevent people from having concerns. What we can do and what we have done is follow the law.
Thank you, Jonathan. No, it's not as much the property owner, it's the plan in general, I guess I'm concerned about. If we're allowing all these waivers and then these waivers kind of damage a property, I guess that's where my concerns are. And I guess you don't have to answer that because I understand, of course, I'm not your client, but there is definitely concerns here regarding wells, et cetera. So, and it's not the poor person who might be moving in, it's the project in general. The state's allowing this, the town might allow this. That's what my concern is. So thank you.
Mr. Hoffman, you have a question or a comment?
Yes, I'm wondering whether town council has been consulted with respect to this matter yet, or whether they will be, because I certainly hope you're not relying solely on the advice of the developers, consultants, and attorneys as far as figuring out how this whole process works and what the board's rights are and all of that.
I think town council's on the line, isn't she, Mr. Chair?
Yes, I can assure you that we are in
All
constant
right.
communication with town council on any issues, legal issues that arise in connection.
Wonderful.
With so
That's
yes,
what I wanted to hear. Thank you.
We have good advice and good support from our town council.
Wonderful.
Any other public comments or questions? Not hearing anything. Board members, any other questions or comments?
Not
yet. Laverne?
No, nothing,
No,
nothing
okay.
more.
Well, it seems to me we're at a point where we want to consider closing the hearing.
Could we speak to the letter that Jonathan submitted earlier, just to go over the 3 salient points to have that in the record? I'm happy to hear that you're interested in closing the hearing, but did want to get that on the record if you don't mind.
If he wants to speak to it or you want to speak to it, go ahead.
I mean, I'm going to just speak to the couple of concerns, because they were directed at me, and they were directed at me as a professional. And it's possible that the correspondence that we sent in late today has not made its way to the neighbors. And this is specifically regarding the Pell process and relative to my conversations with Mass Housing. The FOIA request that you made.
Lynn, just a minute. Let me stop you there, because I think a lot of people may not know what you're talking about. Just as background, There was a letter submitted on behalf of quite a few of the people from the neighborhood that raised questions about the process by which you and others on behalf of the applicant engaged with Mass Housing, and suggesting that maybe not everything was done properly. Is that what you're referring to?
Yes, there were three accusations or questions. One was that Mass Housing was not informed that this was a scattered site and that I wasn't truthful about having conversations with them. So I'm going to address that first. First and foremost, your FOIA request was to Kat Miller. She was not the person involved at the beginning of the process. The person involved was their legal counsel, Jessica Malcolm, and one of their other staff members, Mike Busby. So we have submitted correspondence between my office and Mass Housing saying, essentially, we haven't worked on a scattered site before. We want to, go through it with you and make sure that this is something that you would consider. So that correspondence has been included. The second accusation was that we had not properly engaged with the town during the Pell process with regard to providing information or a site walk. And I said, I have at least 16 emails between my office and your interim planner at the time, Lori Harbottle, as well as the building inspector with regard to prior to when we submitted the application, the conversations that were had, as well as the parties that attended the site walk. The third is more of a legal matter, and I'm going to ask if Jonathan has anything to add to it. But I want to assure you that I have been truthful in what I've brought to this meeting, and we thoroughly vetted this before we went to Mass Housing, and we tried to include the town as best we could. Thank you.
Jonathan, do you want to say something?
I guess just briefly, because the third issue is really a rehash of something that has already been discussed, I think, at greater length than it merits, which is the notion that a scattered site development, in the words of the letter, cannot be approved. Even the Farm Road decision didn't say cannot. It made clear that even under that regulatory scheme, the board would have had the ability to approve it. In this case, I'm not going to repeat what I've previously briefed to the board, which is that that decision was clearly made under a prior regulatory scheme, and I have no doubt whatsoever that that would not be the decision of the Housing Appeals Committee today. And again, it is important to note that months before the Pell application was submitted, Lynn contacted the town planner, specified that it was a scattered site project, had conversation, there was a Zoom. She shared the plans. From day one, there was transparent communication with everyone involved, Mass Housing and town staff, about the process, about the nature of the scattered site development, about when site visits would be held. Town officials did attend the site visits, so clearly they knew about it. And the ultimate issuance, at one point, Mass Housing's chief legal counsel specifically emailed Lynn and said, we are comfortable with you moving forward with a Pell application for this scattered site development. So the notion that they either weren't aware of it or didn't focus on it when they made their requisite findings, including that the site's appropriate for the project, I think is not borne out. There was one suggestion in one of the correspondence that I had said there had been specific conversations with Mass Housing about the Farm Road decision. That is not true. I never said that. And we've never suggested that. There'd be no reason to have a conversation about a non-precedential, non-binding, decades-old decision under a prior regulatory scheme. So just to clarify that.
Jonathan, you and Lynn have referred to the Pell process or the Pell application, just for
I'm
the-
sorry, that is the project eligibility letter, which is the approval process required from a subsidizing agency prior to even being able to file a comprehensive permit application with the board.
Thank you. Mr. Hoffman, you want to say something?
Yeah, that was just straw man argument after straw man argument. Okay, where do I start? First, I think we have a problem with Mass Housing's FOIA department because they should have included all correspondence between the developer and his agents and Mass Housing. That's what they sent me. That's what I sent to the board. If there was stuff left out of there, I guess we need to go back to Mass Housing and dig around a bit deeper. Second, I never said that you didn't discuss scattered sites at all. I'm saying that how detailed could it have been if this Farm Street Trust never even came up? Okay, and there was, according to Mass Housing, that was all of the correspondence. How detailed was this? Okay. And third, I said that the fact that it wasn't discussed in the correspondence shows that they never even considered it, which contrasts is in opposition to Attorney Silverstein's legal argument that this was an issue that was decided by Mass Housing and it's a done deal. So, I just, none of that satisfied me, unfortunately. And I find the attitude of the developers, consultants, and this sneering at us, calling us snobs, and mischaracterizing our arguments and everything to be completely unprofessional. Thank
Well,
you.
let's maintain the decorum here. I don't want to get into ad hominems and so forth. We have your submission, and we'll evaluate it with their response and see where that leaves us. Any other comments from members of the public? Okay, Lynn, any reason not to close the hearing at this point?
The only reason I would suggest to not close the hearing is if you want to work on a decision and discuss it in the public hearing, because once you close the public hearing, no one is allowed to have any input outside of the board members. And so I know that we have, a week left. We feel like everyone has made phenomenal forward movement on it. The tires have been kicked. And we would be open to allowing a small extension to try and work on the permit if that is the will of the board.
Let me ask town council if they have any comments on Lynn's suggestion.
No, Mr. Chair, I think that's fine either way. If you want to allow us, if the developer wants to agree to a small extension to continue the discussion, there's no issue with that. There's also no issue with closing the public hearing tonight.
I'm just concerned. I'm going to be fully occupied through the 31st next week. So there's a couple of considerations. One is that after the hearing closes, the board has 40 days in which to issue their final decision. So if we don't close the hearing yet by agreement, then that gives us a little more time. On the other hand, if we want to move forward and get this resolved sooner rather than later, we can close the hearing and just have, as Lynn says, once the hearing closes, there's no opportunity for further input from the applicant or the public. It's just up to the board members with their counsel and perhaps their consultants to decide how to rule on this and what, if any, decision to issue.
How do you usually handle writing a decision? Oftentimes we, as the development team, set forth a first draft to get it going, and other times the municipality provides the draft of it. So I don't know if you have had any time to think about that.
Lynn, we've only had one 40B project that we've handled in recent memory, certainly in the time that most of us have been on the board. That was the Red Robin Pastures on 109 a year or so ago. And what we did there was with town council, we drafted the decision, and that worked out fine, and that was a whole lot more complicated than this one is.
The other thing I'll say, Mr. Chair, is if you wanted to close the public hearing, it's not unusual for town council and applicants council to work on a draft decision, and then town council can confer with the board in a work session and work on that draft decision. So if that's something that, and I suspect that must have, or likely must have happened with your other 40B, that there was some sort of dialogue between town council and the applicants council. I don't know that for sure, but it's not uncommon.
Actually not. We didn't do that. Anyway, board members, you have any preferences for whether to close the hearing or continue it for a little longer in order to allow participation by the applicant in our deliberations, our initial discussions anyway?
I feel like I'm ready to close the meeting. I'm close,
One reason I'd be sort of interested in leaving it open is I know there was some concern around sort of the aesthetics of the septic along kind of the Trout Brook, Clay Brook kind of corner. If there's an opportunity to get a sort of a visual representation of what that could look like, it may at least alleviate some of the concerns from the neighbors on what sort of they may eventually see, to this go forward. But I don't know if there's interest on sort of the applicant side to produce something like that for the record.
Lynn, are you receptive to providing some kind of visual of what the septic for lots 1A and 2A would look like from the street?
I'm gonna mute myself and get in touch with my client on that one.
I think in order to keep the hearing open, they probably need a definitive list of what we still require from them, so that they don't just keep coming back and, like what Ahmed said, maybe we could get a look at that, or whatever anybody else on the board thinks is important.
Well, at this point, there's nothing required for them unless we ask them for it, as Nadir has just done. So if there's anything else the board wants the applicant to submit, we need to hear about it now.
I'm good.
So Lynn, what are your thoughts on submitting something to address Nadir's issue?
I think, Mr. Chair, that she's trying to get in touch with our client, and because obviously that's additional expense, and we also don't know how long it would take to pull that together.
Okay, well, we can stand by.
Yeah, I'm sorry, my apologies, and I appreciate that. We don't want to open up a whole new can of worms here. We would be keeping, doing the extension for two purposes. One, we can try and have Dan and Aaron work together to produce that facade plan that you're looking for, that view from the street with some landscaping on it, and to go over the decision. We're not looking for a brand new laundry list of items to go over.
Well, I can assure you, I think all of us would like to get this, move on and have the hearing closed. We're not looking for reasons to prolong the process.
Yeah, I understood. We just, there was only so much we could do in the time that we had. We hear that it is a concern of everyone's. So we'd like to try and satisfy that concern. I know Aaron and Dan are on the line. I don't know how fast we can get, that document together, or how fast you can draft a decision. So, I don't know if that's something you want to think about a little bit.
Well, do you want to ask your folks how long it might take them to produce what Nadir is suggesting?
Sure. I don't know, Aaron, if you guys, I see texts are coming through. So let me just take a look there. Hang on. Aaron, what do you think?
It's something we can put together.
Because
In all
I know
honesty,
you've
the
got somebody on
renderings-
vacation this week, so.
Right, so we have that happening. In all honesty, these started as things that were, for sample viewings. So if we are gonna take it to the level of putting something like where we're looking at a street view and seeing multiple renderings, that is gonna take time, because we're going into like more of a less of a sample and more into that further detail. So it is something that could be a couple weeks out to get everything put together.
So are we looking at it's something like the 8th, or are we looking at something like the 15th?
Hang on, let me just pull up the calendar just to have that in front of me. Probably something towards the end of that week of the 8th, I think we could get together. Yeah, we could probably work on that through the next couple weeks, and probably towards the end of the 8th, 9th week that we could do that.
Mr. Chairman, what do you think about trying to reconvene the 12th, to have both the plan and a draft? Is that reasonable?
I was going to say, we're looking at continuing the meeting until some day the week of the 12th.
I assume we're going to avoid the 14th.
You assume what?
I said, I assume we're going to avoid the 14th, Valentine's Day.
This isn't the way you want to celebrate Valentine's Day?
Listen, Zoya and my husband are here, so it doesn't really matter to me.
Yeah, it's not a big deal to me, but it all depends on what works for the people that need to participate.
I also just want to see if Jonathan has any constraints that week.
It looks like the only night I could not do is I have a meeting at 6 on the 12th. So I don't think I'd be able to do a 7 o'clock Zoom that evening, but the rest of the week is relatively open.
Yeah, and I've got something on the 15th. How's the 13th looking?
I don't think we need Sean or Cliff for that if we're just going to be reviewing this visual rendering. So board members, what's your availability on the 13th or the 14th?
14th or 15th are better for me.
Me too, 14th or 15th.
The 15th would work then.
Yeah, but somebody said they couldn't do the 15th.
Yeah.
15th is hard for me.
sorry.
I was joking about the 14th, if that works for everybody.
Does the 14th work for all the board members? Even if it's not
Yes.
ideal?
Yes.
Nadir?
Sure.
Okay.
Yep.
I
can
wouldn't
do it.
think that would be a long night the way this has been, relatively speaking. Okay, so
And we can certainly get the document over to, Sean and Cliff, the week before, and if they've got, comments on it, hopefully good ones.
so I'll entertain a motion to continue the hearing to Wednesday, February 14th at 7 o'clock via Zoom.
Kajal is raising his hand.
Yeah, we're also gonna have to get you something in writing. We'll have Jonathan work on that tomorrow to
I'm
extend the
sending it now.
180 days.
Right. Yeah, I've got a quickie form I can send Jonathan to do that.
Perfect.
Something we've used before. Board members, does the 14th work? I guess it does. Anybody want to move to continue to the 14th?
So
I
moved.
move that we continue the meeting till the 14th of
Have a
February.
second? Somebody
Second.
second? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, so I thought we were going to close tonight, but we get to have a few more weeks of fun here, and really celebrate on Valentine's Day. So we'll look forward to your submissions. Thank you, everybody. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Good night.
See you then.
Thank-
Good
Good night,
night.
everybody.
Good night.
Good night. Good night from California.